This episode is sponsored by Grow Therapy. Grow Therapy was founded on the belief that quality mental health care should be accessible. It makes finding an in-network therapist easy. Go to growtherapy.com to find your match and let insurance pay for your therapy.
Welcome to a place where you'll leave feeling whole. The Counseling Podcast brings at-home counseling right to you, focusing on self-care, self-expression, and breaking down barriers. Dr. Jaclyn and Dr. Stokes bring over 20 years of combined experience and a new sense of style to the word counseling. The two use humor and lighthearted conversation to explore these deeper feelings. Let's take the stigma away from counseling together.
Welcome to the Counseling Podcast. I'm Dr. Jaclyn.
And I'm Dr. Stokes.
And we have a special guest, Julia Kristina, here. And why don't you go ahead and share with everyone who you are, what you do, and where we can find you.
Thank you for having me. Like Dr. Jaclyn said, my name is Julia Kristina. I am a registered clinical counselor up here in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And I say that I help heart-centered humans break through the crap that is holding them back so that they can like themselves and their lives more every day. And pretty much, anything that's getting in your way and holding you back from, thinking how you want to think, feeling how you want to feel, having what you want to have, living how you want to live. That is what I help people with. And I have a YouTube channel where I talk a lot about this stuff. We focus a lot on anxiety, on boundaries, on self-confidence, just getting clear in your own head about learning how to have dominion over your own mind and emotions, so you can feel like you are going through life in charge of what is happening in you, even if you can't always control what is happening around you. So that is what I do. Oh, and can I say I have a book coming out?
Great, yes.
Yeah, my first book is coming out on March 8th. So it's called Drive Your Own Darn Bus. And it really is about getting into the driver's seat of your own mind and emotions and ultimately your life. So I'm excited about that. It has been a labor of love over the past 2 years. We can talk a lot about mental fortitude and ready to give up and ready to scrap the whole thing and having tantrums around long-term projects, but maybe another day.
And that's what I love about you and your videos and all your content. It's so motivational, and you really focus on having the person really find their strengths and being mindful about that. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I think what I do and what I've kind of just had to do, because I'm a very open book, honest person, I had to just be honest about what it's like to be human and just talk openly about what it's like to be human. And it's not kind of this rah motivation. You can do it. Just believe in yourself. Just like say your affirmations and do your meditations and all will be great. It's really about acknowledging how our human brains work and really looking at how human brains kind of in their natural state have two parts to them. So part of our brains want to be lazy. Right? The natural state of our brain just wants to be lazy, wants to conserve energy as a survival instinct. So let's say, a long time ago, before we had houses and fences and security systems, and we lived more in tribes and in communities where, there wasn't sort of that protection from the elements or from wild animals, our brains had to always be on alert for potential threats or dangers to our lives. And so what it wants to do is conserve our energy and keep us, from doing a whole lot so that, if there's a flash flood or, a herd of saber-toothed tigers invades your camp, then you have to get out of there as quick as possible. So you have to have that energy reserved. So there's this part of our sort of primitive brain that wants to conserve energy, wants us to be lazy, wants us to just not do anything, which is why you might find it a struggle to always be motivated. And, maybe don't believe the lie that there's any human being that's naturally gung-ho and motivated every single day, 365 days a year. It's just not true. I can guarantee that they have some hacks that they use for that. But, so knowing that there's this part of your brain that wants to conserve that energy. So if you struggle with getting motivated, staying on top of things, it's not you. It's just part of your brain that you need to learn how to work with better. But then there's this other part of our brains as sort of the evolved brain that thrives off of growth and creativity and exploration and innovation and like living and going out there and like having a big, rich, rewarding and fulfilling life and contributing, right? Contributing to the greater good. So our brain kind of has these two parts to it. And what I do a lot is teaching people how to manage the part that wants to keep you, sitting on the couch eating Doritos and watching Netflix, and kind of how to really just lean into the part that thrives off of that like growth and learning and contributing and creativity.
That's wonderful.
And I work with a lot of clients that feel like they get stuck. They get stuck in maybe their own self-doubt, and have trouble finding that being present and, being mindful and kind of getting to overcome. Is there any tips that you can give people to kind of take that next step to overcome those patterns of being stuck?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Such a good question, Dr. Jaclyn. There's so many reasons why we get stuck. And I'm going to say that 99% of it starts right up in here between our two ears and our own minds and our own thoughts and our own beliefs and our own self concept, right? Our own sort of conceptualization of ourselves and who we are and what we can do and what we deserve and who we're allowed to be and where we're allowed to go and what we're allowed to try and the results that we are qualified to have, right? Like I'm not talking about like an actual educational qualification, but just as a human being, we have all these stories about, like I'm not good enough for that, or I don't deserve that, or I can't have that, or, there's too many things from my past that is going to kind of make it so that it's not possible for me to have that. And so, obviously we have limits as human beings. Probably if you're 35 and are like, I want to become a prima ballerina, it might be a little too late. And it's not just, a mindset thing, but hey, I'm not here to judge. I'm sure it's possible. Someone could do it somewhere. But, understanding kind of, our own limits while also not allowing our limits to be solely in our own minds, right? There are going to be some physical limits. There are going to be some circumstantial limits in our outside world. But so much of us struggle with self-doubt is because we have these stories in our brains about, like I said, about what we're allowed to have, who we are, what we deserve. And so we continue to replay those stories in our minds and believe them, right? And that's the toughest part, is that we believe the thoughts we think. But the truth is that our thoughts are not always truths, right? And our feelings are not always facts. But we kind of, stick our stake down in the ground and we're like, I am setting up camp here. I am going to live here. I am going to, build an outdoor kitchen here in these thoughts and in these beliefs. And this is just the way that it is. And just the way that I am. And that's it. Instead of actually considering the fact that these thoughts may not even be your own, right? So when we're back in our formative years, and that's why they're called the formative years, because we're forming our identity, we're forming our thoughts and ideas and beliefs about who we are and what we deserve and, what we can do in our lives and how lovable we are and all of that stuff. We're forming that based on our circumstances, based on how we're treated, based on, interactions and experiences that we have during those formative years. We're forming our self-concept. And we don't know that it's happening. Obviously, it's happening at this unconscious level. And a lot of the beliefs that we have about ourselves now, about not being good enough, not being, smart enough, not being lovable enough, whatever that is, they are messages that we picked up from others during those formative years. Maybe if someone told you, you can't do that, or why can't you be more like this, or what's wrong with you, or you're never going to amount to anything, or why can't you be more like so-and-so, or whatever that is, right? So we develop these thoughts that are somebody else's assessments, judgments, and thoughts about us. We unconsciously adopt them as our own without knowing that they're not even our own thoughts. And then we continue to bring them with us into adulthood and to continue to think them and believe them and live, honestly, a lot of the times according to them without even realizing that they're not even our own thoughts. They're somebody else's that they've put in there and we've unconsciously agreed to them. But what if we could stop agreeing to them? What if we could just stop thinking that just because I'm thinking it, it means it's true? And I know that I'm making it sound so much more simple than it is, because it's not just like, I'm just going to believe this about myself and then that's that. Those thoughts get lodged in there. So it is a whole process. And, I work with people a lot in sort of undoing those thoughts. So unthinking those thoughts and then working in a step-by-step process to rethink the thoughts that we want to be thinking and learning how to actually believe them. Because you can't just be like, one day, like, I'm a piece of crap. And then, the next day be like, well, I'm God's gift to humanity. Your brain's not going to believe it, right? It's just not going to work like that. It doesn't matter if you tell yourself in the mirror 50,000 times a day. If it's not something that you believe, your brain is not going to buy it. You may as well just, stand in the mirror and tell yourself you're a pickle, and you'd probably get the same result. You're not actually going to believe it. And so working on our self-esteem and our self-confidence comes, at the foundation from our thoughts, right? We have thoughts and beliefs that we have unconsciously agreed to be true because we continue to think them without dispute, right? Without protest. And then we wonder why we continue to struggle with our sense of self when we haven't actually considered that there could be an alternative way of thinking about ourselves, believing about ourselves, or just actually conceiving of ourselves.
I think this is also important. And what I'm hearing is it's almost as if you help people create a pathway where they can achieve a deeper sense of self-empowerment and autonomy and ownership of their internal world. And I love the idea that, the point that you make about how a lot of these belief systems are sort of projected onto us early on in childhood. And it takes a whole lot of work therapeutically to help someone unwind a lot of these ingrained belief systems. I'm curious, when you have an individual who ends up making modifications in some of these belief systems and these internal dialogues, what are some of the changes and improvements you might see in an individual once they start this journey?
Man, okay. Showing up differently, right? Having the confidence to go for different things, not being afraid of failure. Having different relationships, and just really practically speaking, not sitting at the end of a night out with friends replaying and overthinking every little thing you said, like, oh my gosh, why did I say that? Oh, that was so dumb. Oh, I look so stupid. Oh wait, I wonder if they took that the wrong way. I hope they didn't think I mean that. Okay, I kind of shared that information about that person. I hope they don't tell anyone or think that I'm a gossip, right? Like all of this stuff where we're always, it's called in psychology, you both probably know, like a high self monitor. I can never say that word, monitor. When you highly monitor yourself all the time. Now, there's a difference between having a healthy amount of self-awareness and anxious self-monitoring, where you're always like, scrutinizing everything that you say, or maybe you don't say anything and you hold yourself back because of that social anxiety of like not wanting to say the wrong thing, or not wanting to give anyone any reason to judge you or have any thoughts about you that you don't want them to have. Right. And so, we kind of just go through life with staying kind of stuck in these thought patterns. But then when we start to change and we start to free ourselves, right? And we start to be able to be ourselves. And we start to be, and being yourself doesn't mean you do whatever and say whatever and don't care what anybody thinks about it. Obviously not. That's, probably the definition of like narcissism, or, sociopathology, where you just don't care about anyone, have no capacity for empathy, but you don't overcare, right? There's a difference between being aware again and overcaring to the point that it becomes debilitating. Right? When you stop yourself from doing things because you're like, oh, well, what if I fail, or what if I look silly, even though it's something I really want to try, right? We kind of let that fear or that self-consciousness hold us back. We're afraid of looking silly. We're afraid of failing. We're afraid of what people are going to think about us. We've outsourced our sense of self to circumstances and people outside of us. Right? Instead of insourcing our sense of self and getting really clear and solid about what I think about me. Because the more solid I am in what I think about me, the less I'm stressed about what other people think about me, the less I'm worried about it, less I'm overthinking what other people think about me. And, it's interesting because I was thinking about this a couple of years ago and really just trying to pinpoint what is that foundation of our relationship with ourselves? Where does that start? And like any solid relationship, it starts with trust, right? And we never think of this idea of learning how to build trust within ourselves. And I made this little kind of like PDF booklet, this guide. It's called The Simple Steps to Self-Trust, because it really is, teaching people the step-by-step process to start building that foundation. So just really looking at what are the things that help you build trust with another person, right? It's how they treat you, how they talk to you, when they fulfill commitments that they make to you, whether or not they respect you, when you mess up, how do they approach you? Do they like call you down and criticize you? Or do they, call you to task and say, hey, this wasn't your finest moment. How do we make this right? Right? Like all of these things that help us build trust with somebody else. And if you could just think of for your own life, what helps you build trust with someone else, it's amazing how the exact same concepts apply to ourselves, right? Even when it comes to keeping promises to ourselves. When's the last time you said, okay, I'm going to start, I want to feel better, so I'm just going to start, putting more green leafy vegetables into my diet. Or I want to have more energy, so I'm going to start just going for a 20-minute walk around my neighborhood a couple times a week. And then you're like, I'm going to start tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and you don't do it. Right? You don't follow through. You don't show up for yourself. And you think, oh, it doesn't matter. It's just me that's going to be affected by it. So it doesn't matter. But your brain knows what's going on. And your brain picks up on that, the subtlety. Oh, you don't really matter. What's important to you can be pushed aside. Oh, you can just sort of, renege on that commitment. And it's no big deal because you don't really matter. Because your word doesn't really matter. Your word, when you might be great at keeping your word to other people, when it comes to yourself, how good are you at doing that? And not to like hold yourself to like impossible standards and then feel like a failure when you don't, but are you breaking small promises that you keep to yourself that are things that are important to you, that you want to do, that are going to be good for you? Do you continue to make them and break them? And then think it's no big deal instead of realizing that it absolutely is a big deal. Just like if you kept canceling on a friend or backing out or making some excuse why you couldn't fulfill a commitment to a friend or a loved one, they'd start to be like, hey, like, I love you, but like, I'm not into this at all. And I don't really trust you. I can't really count on you because you don't follow through. And that has an impact on a relationship. Right? So all of these things that help us build trust with other people are the same things that allow us to build trust with ourselves. We just don't think of it. And so then, but when we start to build that solid foundation of trust and learn like the steps to self-trust, that becomes the foundation that we start to grow from. We grow in our relationship with ourselves from that firm foundation of trust, and it becomes a lot easier to build a healthy relationship with ourselves when we have that. Just like it does with any relationship, right? It's a lot easier to build a strong and solid relationship when we have that foundation of trust.
It's really valuing yourself too, right? It's like, I'm worth it to put this work in, and I'm going to treat myself like I would treat my best friend or my mom
Yes.
or my child. And so it's also working with that, building their self-esteem.
Yes.
And where those core beliefs have come from, like you said.
Yeah. And really recognizing people for doing this work. Like anyone that thinks that therapy is for like weak people has never gone to therapy. Like, do you know how much courage and how much guts it takes to look inward and to be honest with ourselves and to be able to work through that stuff, right? Like I was just doing, so my book's coming out on March 8th, and I was just doing a Facebook Live the other day on my page, doing a little promo for it. And, I was asking people to do the pre-sale just because of the way it works with a lot of these booksellers. If they get a lot of pre-sales, they're likely to carry it for longer. And then we can kind of get this work into more hands, a accessible way of doing this work into more hands. And so I just asked my audience, I have an incredible online community who are so supportive, and we've just sort of had each other's backs for several years now. And so, I asked them, if they're thinking about getting the book, if they could get it on pre-sale, that would really help me out. That would be amazing. And then I said, let me know in the comment section if you did purchase a pre-sale, because I want to thank you, but I also want to congratulate you. Right? I want to congratulate you and recognize you because you're taking a step to do this work to have better for yourself. You're valuing yourself enough to invest in yourself and actually put your money where your mouth is. Like, it's not just like this passive thing. It's like you're paying money for something. And that's a symbol, right? That is a symbol to your brain that says, I am willing to sacrifice this money and this time to feel better for me, right? To feel better from, because I deserve this from me. I deserve to feel good. I deserve to have the kind of life that I can have with a managed mind, or at least a half managed mind, right? I say, if we can get to like half managed in our minds, then we are doing really good. And can you imagine if half the population of this world was going through life with at least a half managed mind? Can you imagine, especially in this day and age, how much different it would be? So yes, we are doing this work for ourselves and valuing ourselves, but we are actually making a significant contribution to the world when we are investing in our own well-being. Because when we are feeling good, when we're feeling solid and secure in who we are, when we're feeling good about who we are, when we're just feeling good as a human being, we show up different. We love different. We live different. We contribute different, right? And that makes the world different. So it's not just for you, if for those of us who, feel maybe a little bit like not quite there to like be okay with fully investing in myself, because maybe you grew up with some, kind of Puritan beliefs or whatever, that like you can't do things for yourself because that's selfish and that's bad and whatever. Okay, if you're not quite there yet where you can get on board with investing in yourself just for that sake, then know that you are also making the world a better place by taking care of your own mental and emotional well-being.
When they're valuing themselves, they also have to value therapy. Like you said, like they have to come in and they have to know, like, that stigma has to be taken away from therapy, and knowing that, this is a place where it's going to help me out. And I don't have to just come when I'm super low. I can go when I can want to, celebrate myself as well.
Exactly. And do you both find that therapy, the stigma therapy, is being challenged a little bit more? Like it's getting better?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think especially like in the last 5 years, I've really seen an uptick with that, and a lot of different types of people are coming into therapy, whereas I didn't see as much years ago. And so I think there's definitely in North America, there's been a cultural shift that's continuing to happen and evolve, and it's really great to see.
Totally. I agree. I think everybody needs a therapist. I'm like, an entire, 50 minutes where you just get to think about the things that have been going on in your life and get fully supported through it without feeling guilty that you're like monopolizing all the attention of the person you're talking to. I'm like, that is the best. Right? Where you just really get that time and that space to process what's happening inside of you, instead of just going around and around in your head that so many of us do. And then we kind of get stuck in those spirals and don't really know what to do. Or we think that, over analyzing and overthinking is some kind of viable solution, where it's not, just kind of keeps us in a spiral. But, having someone that's trained to hold the space and help guide and direct us through that, and, guide and direct us to our own truth, right? And to our own place of feeling safe and solid and secure in who we are. Like, I don't know, I can't imagine anything better. And I'm like, why wouldn't you? I have a therapist. I'm like, I don't know. Have either of you ever talked to a therapist?
Oh yeah, tons.
Yeah, right? And I'm like, therapists need therapists. We're human. We go through stuff that doesn't, everybody needs a therapist. And it's interesting. It's a stereotype for sure. But I remember earlier in my career, I worked at a clinic, in the West End in Vancouver that, typically has a really high gay population. So a lot of my clients were gay. And it was really interesting because I learned from some of them that, like having a therapist is like a status symbol, right? And a few of my clients would be like, oh yeah, we just like sit around and we talk about like, oh, my therapist said blah, 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 blah. And it's like, who's your therapist, or who are you seeing these days? And it's just sort of this, like this prestigious, like, it's like people brag about their therapist. I'm like, that is so cool. I think everyone should be bragging about their therapist and what they're learning in therapy, and like share the wealth. And actually, speaking of that as well, I have one of my one of my clients, she has a group of girlfriends that are all really close. They all work out together in one of their garages once a week. And she sees me. And then every Friday when they work out, they'll start off by her friends being like, okay, so what did you and Julia talk about today? Right. And like share the wealth, share the information, share the tools. And then she asked, she's like, is that okay? I'm like, oh my gosh, of course. Yes. Share all of it. Take notes, photocopy them, pass them around. And they sit around. And I think that that is so cool. And if everyone could just be more honest with the fact that like no one rides for free. None of us have it all figured out. None of us are perfect or, mentally or emotionally, devoid of any sort of challenges. Sooner we're able to just admit that and be honest about it, the sooner we'll be able to work through it, to get better and to, like I said, feel better and live better and love better and have better. And really just also making it open and honest so that other people are like, oh, I guess it's not that big of a deal. I guess I might go see a therapist too and get that support.
Yeah, like mental health is cool, right? I think it's a lot like physical health. Like when you look at some of the exercise revolutions that happened in like the 1960s, 1970s, a lot of times I think to the general population, exercise wasn't all that cool prior to that. But
Yeah.
now, it's like if you don't go to a gym, if you don't have some sort of, physical workout regimen, that's like it's unusual, I think, in a lot of
Yeah.
circles now. And I think mental health care is sort of catching up. And I think that's the beauty of holistic mental health, holistic wellness. I know you practice in that area. It's like pulling the whole mind, body, spirit together to create this
Totally.
overarching sense of well-being in human beings.
Yes. Yeah. That biopsychosocial spiritual, the like four dimensions of the self. Like, are you investing in all of them? Your biology, your physical health, your psychological health, your social, right? Your community. And I mean, I think that is a whole other topic for a whole other day, about how sort of the breakdown of essential community has had a significant detrimental impact on our mental health, and even more so now with more technology, right? Like we are relational beings, we are communal beings. Throughout history we have always lived in community and relied on each other, and there weren't like separation of houses with like 75-foot lots, right? Like people were living together in spaces together, and children were raised by the village, and men went out and sort of did their hunting together, and women stayed back and did the cooking and the weaving and the water collecting. And in a lot of communities that still happens, right? And there is so much more of that. We rely on each other for our survival needs, but now in this part of the world, and there's so many parts of the world, and we don't rely on each other for our survival needs anymore. And so we think that we don't need each other for our mental and emotional needs, because we've had that so much separation, and that that rugged independence that sounds great and liberating, but it's actually can be very constricting, right? It can be very restricting when we're so independent that we forget that we need other human beings. That social element is, and I'm so curious about this social element because I've seen, and you both have probably seen it too, even just within the duration of your careers for the last, 10, 15 years, how much more people are struggling with loneliness. Like we're more connected digitally than we ever have been before, but more disconnected relationally, like genuine, authentic face-to-face relationally than we ever have been before. And I think that is, probably one of the biggest problems of all. So we forget about that social dimension of the self. And then, of course, the fourth one, the spiritual dimension. But where do you find your meaning and your purpose and what's important to you on a bigger level? Yeah, lots of things.
And everything's online now, like you said, like more digital, more technology. And for people who don't feel comfortable, like, I don't want to go out and meet with my therapist, you can do more virtual sessions now. And even with the videos that you put out, that's why I love them so much, because you can reach so many people and share that wealth of, of how to overcome these struggles. And they don't even have to leave their house, and then they can feel more comfortable. Okay, if this is what it's like to see a therapist, I'm going to go, because she's speaking the truth and she's giving me good
Yes,
advice, and, it's kind of giving them that.
totally. Totally. And, don't get me wrong, I'm not against technology in any
Oh,
way.
sure.
I think that technology needs to be a supplement, not a replacement.
Of course.
right? Like, just like online friends and stuff like that, or people that you meet on social media that you have like little text conversations with. I think that that's great and that can definitely sort of enhance your life. But I think so many of us, are using that as a replacement. And even, and I shouldn't speak freely about this because I don't know the research on it, but my general sort of idea is like you see kids that are really into gaming and they have their headsets on and they're talking to other kids and they're playing games with other kids. But I want to know if that is as beneficial to kind of social development and for fulfillment as running outside and kicking a soccer ball, or, just like running to the store and getting a Slurpee or getting some candy and like hanging out with your friends and like maybe like getting into a little bit of trouble, like just sort of doing what kids do and having fun or playing hide and go seek, or like that kind of stuff. That and I'm just very curious about what the long-term effects, not that I'm against video games, I don't think they're Satan's spawn or anything, but I'm very curious about sort of these extreme ends of things where people are only engaging in conversations online, through chats and stuff like that, and not even having like FaceTime conversations, not even real-time conversations with real human beings, even, just on a screen, but like not even having that, where everything is curated, right? When you're texting, when you're messaging, you can think about what you're going to say, you can curate it, you can kind of create this persona that's not necessarily an accurate representation of who you are. And there is a disconnect there when we don't feel like we are being genuinely connected to for who we are, right? So there's filters and there's editing and there's time delays, and we can kind of become this persona. But then wonder, I have all these contacts with all these people. Why do I feel so lonely? Oh, it's because nobody really knows me. No one ever has seen me mess up. No one has, like, no one has ever kind of just seen me make mistakes. And so I don't really know if people will love me and accept me if they see the real me. I mean, that's going down a completely different rabbit hole, but just kind of something to think about. Um, you know, Sometimes we do like to stay home and do things from home, but being really mindful that that's not a sustainable solution for our lives, right? To just do everything online, to stay home, to never go out. Like, we need to be around other people. We need to be around people that piss us off, and we need to know what it is to work things out and to figure things out. We need to put our foot in our mouths and, apologize for that and like feel silly, but then like work it out. And, like we need to learn how to kind of deal with life. And so I'm just curious to see what's going to happen for this very kind of digital generation. And if there is enough of that, if there's enough of authenticity happening, enough of, non-editing interactions happening, we're learning just how to be a human being in real time with other human beings. And maybe I'm completely off. Like, maybe I have no idea what I'm talking about and everything is fine and kids are doing great. But I've just seen so much, especially in the loneliness department. And that's my theory about loneliness, is that we're missing a lot of that real life kind of messy relationship, figuring out opportunity.
I think it goes back to what you were saying in the beginning about mindfulness and self-doubt. Because if you're, comparing yourself online to other people, or you're not comfortable with going out, and you find yourself more being comfortable in the state of being home and behind your computer, then you're going to, those self-doubts and that self-comparison and not being mindful are all gonna, you're going to have more of that.
Totally. Totally. Because it's all just false, right? It's all just false. It's not based on reality. So then, yeah, we see other people's edited, curated, photoshopped, filtered lives. And we're like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? My life does not look like that. I do not feel like that. Where the truth is, for pretty much everyone, life is a lot of the times just sort of routine and boring, right? Like, nobody is having these fantastical lives. And you even see celebrities who do have these fantastical lives struggling with addiction and, substance abuse and mental breakdowns, because it's like you have everything and you think it's going to be perfect because you have this big, amazing, exciting life and everything you could ever want at your fingertips, but you're still not happy. That's not where happiness comes from. I mean, I'm not saying that, money doesn't help with some areas, but, research shows actually very little. Having enough money to like sustain your needs and to have some extra for some like fun and leisure, anything kind of way over and beyond that doesn't have any kind of significant impact on our happiness. So yeah, right? Like it's just realizing how important relationships are, genuine relationships, unfiltered relationships, and not kind of buying into the lie that anyone has a perfect life or has it all figured out, regardless of what it looks like on social media or anywhere else.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we're relational creatures. We need that. We absolutely need that for our development. Well, Julia, this has been wonderful. I want to ask you just one kind of final thing you want to let our listeners know about their mental health, about their emotional well-being. Just one final takeaway that you'd like to share. We covered a lot.
We did cover a lot. Your thoughts that this is just the way you are and there's nothing that can be do about it, and you're stuck with taking things personally, overthinking things, getting anxious, worrying, being super self-conscious, doubting yourself, your thoughts that this is just the way that you are and there's nothing you can do about it are just thoughts.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Julia. And I want to read your book when it comes out, and then we need to have you back so you can talk about your book.
I would love to.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you to our listeners, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for joining us here today on the Counseling Podcast with Dr. Jaclyn and Dr. Stokes. Please take this time to thank yourself for putting in the work. If this episode impacted you in any way, let us know with a loving and honest review. If you have any questions or want to continue the conversation from today, you can reach out to us at thecounselingpodcast@gmail.com, and we can answer your questions right here on the show. Or you can find Dr. Jaclyn and Dr. Stokes on Instagram at DocJaclyn and at dr.jeremiah.stokes.